Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining over lunch as well. Choosing us over lunch is a big thing. So, obviously, in case you'd missed it, AI became accessible to the masses in 2023. Don't think anybody's mentioned it, allowing almost anybody to use it. And the topic of IoT and AI, I think, and its impact on our lives is getting involved excitement and fear across the tech world. And I think this is being especially felt in the cybersecurity space. On one hand, there's kind of a need to enable businesses to be market leaders through the use of this kind of technology. On the other hand, well, our IT security teams are faced with an enormous challenge as defenders of our kind of organization's infrastructure and data, and of course the customers.
So to help navigate this conflict, we're going to take you on a journey today to understand the wearable, the shareable, and why we think sometimes it's pretty unbearable, especially since it's giving the cybersecurity criminals an advantage we really cannot afford them to have. And who is the we when we're talking about this? It's everyone in this room. It's us that are supporting our teams build and create these tools. And it's also we as consumers of these tools. So consumers either knowingly or unknowingly. And so today we're going to discuss the rampant tech adoption of AI and wearable devices, the erosion of what we are calling the social contract, and the proliferation of the quantified self, and also lots of examples of AI and wearable misuse.
So why is this a problem for us in the tech industry? Well, I mean, the field of cybersecurity kind of evolved from corporate IT as mature protocols, architecture and security controls. However, the Internet of Things and AI are quite a different story. Security policies and implementation in this field are pretty immature, and attackers are starting to take advantage of that. And this is exacerbated by the fact that organizations are being blindsided by the fact that AI is being used heavily in their organizations already. And this adoption is actually a bottom-up revolution, with individual adopters and their employees rather than a top-down as a more traditional leadership mandate. And this stealth adoption is happening with little oversight to the potential security exposures.
So basically, the genie is out of the bottle when it comes to this, and us in tech cannot just sit back and let it happen. But the other thing is we can't just block or ban it either, as much as some of us would like to. So the only thing for us to do is to embrace it. But embrace it in the spirit of adventure, but embrace it with, obviously, lots of guardrails. And, as many of you in this room who will be supporting teams build this software, we need to think about the customer journey more. We need to think about how we support our colleagues that are actually building this to help them become more security aware when it comes to these tools. And it will very much be a team effort. It's not just something that the cybersecurity team is going to lead on. Now, a little disclaimer here. This talk is going to be a Debbie Downer talk because, it's AI. We recognise, however, that for every bad use of AI, there is a good one as well. But this talk isn't about that because we haven't got time to talk about all the great stuff that AI is doing at the moment. As a side note as well, that this topic is moving so fast that when we first started doing this talk in February, we have now changed it 6 times because people keep making immense cock-ups when it comes to AI, and it's nice to keep up with them. So, let's introduce ourselves. Jeff.
Thank you. I'm Jeff Watkins. I'm the CPTO at Create Future, was called X-Design until last week, thought I'd slip up there. 500-strong tech consultancy headquartered in Edinburgh with offices here in Leeds, Manchester and London. I finished my cybersecurity MSc last year, and I've just started a MSc in Artificial Intelligence in January, so I'm kind of a bit of a glutton for punishment. So somebody with an interest in both cybersecurity and AI, I think this kind of subject really floats my boat. And I'm also one half of Compromising Positions with my co-host.
That's me, Lianne Potter. I am head of security operations for a major retailer as the day job. When I'm not doing that, I'm also known as the cyber anthropologist because my background is anthropology. And basically what cyber anthropology is looking at why we do things from a cultural perspective around technology and particularly cybersecurity. So if you're finding lots of insecure behaviours proliferating in your organisation, try and think maybe it's something to do with the culture around us. And as Jeff mentioned, there is a little plug for our podcast, Compromising Positions. That slide's wrong, we should have changed that. That's it. Award-winning podcast, Compromising Positions. Last week we won an award for Best Newcomer. We are the only cybersecurity podcast that I know of that only interviews non-cybersecurity people about cybersecurity. So we've had the wonderful Beck on the episode here before. I hope you've caught her talk earlier. So we've had psychologists on, other anthropologists, people working in UX, developers, data, anything that's not cybersecurity profession, coming on the show and talking about how does cybersecurity make them feel? And we also did an AI mini-series as well, so if you like all this talk, you'll probably like that. Now that's the plug over, let's get back to the show.
So we'll start off with a recommendation if you're interested in this kind of thing. It's a book called Robot Rules by Jacob Turner. It's kind of part law analysis, part philosophy, and it's a really important read on the topic. It's quite dense, but I would recommend you chew through it. And it's formed a lot of this talk through the various narratives that we've built over the decades, and some might say centuries if we include things like Mechanical Turk, which was a chess-playing machine from the late 1700s, which wowed people by being able to play chess, seemingly, at the Grandmaster level against a human player. Except it was eventually revealed that he was just a wee man in a box controlling it. Indeed, like Amazon actually give a nod to this by calling their product M-Turk instead of Mechanical Turk because they're down with the kids. And they describe it as a crowdsourcing marketplace that makes it easy for individuals and businesses to outsource processes and jobs to a distributed workforce, because they highlight that their service works because there's still many things that humans can do much more effectively than computers, which is, turns out, really kind of what they were doing with their Just Walk Out stores. Oops. Find it kind of amusing and strangely dystopian in equal measures, which I think is a good vibe to start on as we talk about all the robots around us every day.
So the average person underestimates how many IoT and smart devices they have in their home, their work, and in their businesses. And indeed, the surroundings around them. And last year, the number of voice assistants in the world reached 8 billion, and that's more than the human population. And by 2025, that's supposed to exceed to 30 billion. So it's going to be big. And their proliferation lies in their ease of use, often plug and play straight into the network. Their costs are often really quite cheap to use. Their inconspicuousness, once they're in, you kind of don't notice that they're there. You get used to it really quickly. And because they're convenient. And by convenient, it's the shiny promises that these wearables and IoT devices are saying about making our lives much easier. But when I think, as a security professional, about when I'm trying to enable my devs to build these wonderful tools, I have to think, actually, when I talk about security, it kind of goes against what they're trying to achieve, because security is not easy to use. It can be very complicated to implement. It can be really costly to actually embed security controls. It's highly conspicuous. Like, think about things like MFA and passwords. You literally have a process to actually get to a security position. And very inconvenient if anyone has ever forgot their password and things like that. So how can I compete with that? And it's a conversation that we're going to have to keep having amongst ourselves, because these challenges are not new to us in cybersecurity, because we're always having negotiations with our engineering team about, what is nice and easy to use, but what is also very secure. So there's always going to be a discussion around usability, functionality, and security. And if all the breaches lately are anything to go by, I don't think we're doing very well in that negotiation. So it's not a unique challenge to us in this space, but is the adoption of smart devices complicating things further?
What we think is, the growth of this second internet, which is what the IoT movement is, Internet of Things, has changed the way we live and work, and it relies on different operating systems and protocols. Ones are quite unfamiliar with most of us. And we've seen an explosion of wearable devices, smartwatches, medical devices, smart glasses, etc., which are often collecting and sharing data. Coupled with the fact that these devices are smaller, more numerous, and often inconspicuous, it makes them difficult to secure or even notice they're there. So the shareables we refer to in this talk can come from the sharing of data from a wearable device, but also includes things like data being transmitted by other IoT devices, not necessarily worn, such as smart bulbs, people hack those, security cameras, personal assistants like Alexa, or shareable can mean apps like MyFitnessPal, which can collect data manually or using a wearable. And then, whether it's wearable, shareable, or both, they have the potential to impact our privacy, change the social contract, and blur the lines between our personal, corporate, and civic worlds, which makes it kind of a complex and ever-changing, unique security challenge. And a lot of that change actually does take place in the erosion of the social contracts. And people aren't familiar with the social contract, a guy called Thomas Hobbes in the 1600s described it as when we as individuals give up some of our freedoms and submit to an institution, the government, hospitals, the church, for example, in exchange for protection of our remaining rights for the maintenance of social order. And he said, without this system, we're actually... really, it's chaos. We need this system because the stability of our culture relies on it. Because by our very nature, we're quite self-centered beings, and this doesn't lend itself to the altruism that needs to keep things ticking along nicely. So does the same social contract apply today?
Well, yes. However, with some changes. In the 20th century, we saw the rise of what we would call the individual or individuality. Rigid social norms, like not questioning the government, started to fall away. And in its wake, we see what we now refer to as something called freedom of speech, which we think is very, very normal and a human right. Now, because of the rise of the individual, society began not only to question the rules around them, but actually challenge them. And so this study from McKinsey in their paper, The Social Contract in the 21st Century, they said that the rise of the individual actually materialized in response because the government could not provide socially in the way it had done before. So traditional institutions are becoming unable to sustain their population. So think about everyone's pension age going up. That's the indication of the breakdown of the social contract, which has resulted in society pulling away from the social contract, the traditional social contract. But in its wake, a new type of institution has emerged, one that fosters control algorithmically. So Meta, Google, all these big companies and more, and you might even work for some of these big institutions, the new institutions. With these institutions, we literally sign a contract terms of use. It is literally a social contract we sign to them, which we don't often read, those terms and conditions, the terms of use. But as you're aware of, and I guess a lot of us now have made a lot of peace with, if you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. So why is this the new social contract? Well, because most developed countries cannot function without tech in touching almost every element of their daily lives. So the current social contract can be said to be one where you give up your data rights for your ability to participate in a modern society. But the cost to us, the consumer, is the erosion of our privacy and security in unprecedented, very intrusive ways. I mean, considering quite a few people were a bit uppity about doing the Doomsday Book, and when we do the census, it's a bit rich that we're happy to share all our personal details with Google, for example, than with the census. Yeah, it doesn't end well, that.
Yeah, with every device or platform that we connect ourselves with, we give up a little part of ourselves. And because a good chunk of these devices are with us all the time, that puts aspects of our lives, the private, the public, which includes work, and the social at risk. But alongside that erosion of the social contract, it means we've put a newfound reliance in tech. And these guys are really good at making addictive products. In this new age of permissive sharing, the number of people using wearable devices has reached an all-time high. Where these devices offer convenience and connectivity, they also come with risks that can't be ignored. One of the major concerns is a lot of these devices end up getting connected to corporate resources, which adds another layer of risk. I mean, the lack of data loss prevention when cameras and microphones are in every device further complicates that situation, and it puts organisations at risk of data breaches, privacy violations, and other cyber attacks. Not that DLP is a silver bullet. We haven't figured out quite a way to actually stop people taking a screenshot with their phone of their screen. Until recently, that was pretty arduous. But nowadays, with the picture de-skewing and image to text, actually, it's become really simple. And advances of AI are making this really, really easy. And then you add in wearables with cameras.
No, not that one.
But stuff like Meta has built in partnership with Ray-Ban, a little bit more stylish. It presents a new set of challenges for the defenders of data, which we all care about, whether or not we work in cybersecurity. I mean, the idea of an always-on lifestyle is what a lot of companies are really persuading us we want, but we should ask the questions, really. Did we ask for this, and do we really want this? Imagine a world where these innocuous sunglasses, they're very stylish and worn not just about town, but
in courtrooms, in changing rooms, in private moments where things are supposed to keep quiet. Maybe it's not a pair of glasses. I mean, I'm certainly not cool enough to wear a pair of sunglasses indoors, and I'm just going to look around. You have all made the same fashion decisions. I don't think that stopped you from being very cool. You've just decided not to wear sunglasses indoors. But what about a less obvious device?
Like the Rewind pendant. It records everything you've seen or heard for under $60, and the hardware and the actual subscription is under $20 a month on the cheapest subscription. I mean, don't worry, though. They take your privacy really seriously. But is it actually people like Rewind we really need to be worried about?
Maybe not. I think it's the actual users that we kind of need to be cautious about that are going to be using these devices. Like Josh, for example. What happens when he takes all the intellectual property out of the business when he leaves? Or Randall being in a much better position to be able to pinch all our clients when he gets a job with our competitors? Or what would be absolutely unbearable in my eyes is if I go to one of the rare occasions where I go into the office for a bit of gossip and I find out it's being recorded by one of these things. No, Mike, not cool. Or worse, if you've ever had a conversation with your partner that starts with something like, I've already told you about that. Imagine if they could actually pull the tapes and say, yes, remember, I have actually told you about this. Could AI and wearable devices bring up the rise of breakups and divorces?
But somebody at Microsoft obviously thought this was a really great idea, since it practically replicated every element of it, aside from the cool bit, which is the wearable aspect of the Rewind pendant. As a side note, Rewind's R&D themselves said that customers reported that something that just recorded screens on its own would be considered really weird. Why's my clicker stop working? There we go.
So, and as we've seen in the last few weeks, it hasn't been going very well for Microsoft. You know, they've got into a little bit hot water about it. You know, it's never good to kind of catch the eye of the ICO. But whop whop, recall gets recalled. So what are we going to do about that? Well, you know, in less than 2 weeks getting recalled, which is really bad because I was really excited about Recall because of all the potential memes. It got me really, really excited because I'm a massive fan of the film Total Recall. And this is very much my life at the moment. So it was a gift. It was a gift that they said they were going to recall it in 2 weeks, so I can keep using the 2 weeks meme.
What I'm curious about this all is actually in the early parts of tech, really, we were moving away from the real world and into the cyberspace. Now we're actually walking back into the physical space through something that's referred to as the cyber-physical convergence. This refers to when the IoT movement introduced things like sensors and robotic automation. You can observe and interact with the real world, bridging that gap. And then you add in AI to the mix and start to learn and modify the behaviour based on these kind of interactions.
So, as our wearables and shareables become unbearable, a breach that originates in either of these worlds, so that's the cyber and the physical, can result in a breach in the other, and that makes the threat landscape really, really complex. And all it requires now is that we're going to have to do a convergence of both to be able to be secure. The convergence of the stuff we know from cyber security to keep us safe and the stuff we know about physical security to keep us safe. So that's the policies, the tooling, and our approaches.
We seem to be really captivated by these devices, though, as you've seen some of these here. And so captivated that we're accepting an average of 22 of these devices into our homes as of last year. Another allure to these devices is a more accurate experience, one where IoT and AI do some of the remembering and thinking for us. And that's a really dangerous game to play. I mean, these small form factor devices, like the Rewind pendant and the Humane pin, feel a bit to me just like spy devices of old, just rebadged as assistants. Remember, these assistants aren't just recording your voice and what you're seeing, but also your location, your browsing history, purchases, and also the people around you. So what boundaries are there in public and workplaces at home? Technology is moving much quicker than things like legislation in this area. We might not even know when other people are treading on our boundaries. Recent AI app that matched CCTV images to Instagram photos was a really chilling example of how little privacy we actually have in public spaces.
The prevalence of smart AI assistants, camera glasses, and other always-on devices means that what happened in Vegas stays in Vegas no longer applies. Chatham House rules will just let me take everything off and turn everything off before we can have a conversation. So how far do we go pulling this social contract before these personal assistants might become acceptable to some, but off limits to others? It's a discussion, again, we're going to have to keep having amongst ourselves. Because as this talk title suggests, I think a lot of these products are being built without any consideration or consultation with the intended audience. And the intended audience is all of us. If going by that, it records everyone. And therefore, it will be unbearable to some. Now, these posts on here might be in jest, but I think the ick factor is something that might help us when we're building these tools and devices. But who knows, these AI wearables might just implode on themselves, because although they are wearable and shareable, maybe the market actually is now deeming them too unbearable, but I could be reading too much into this. We in tech must enforce boundaries for the uses of these devices in our organisations. And unfortunately, the legislation, as Jeff said, is really lagging behind in addressing these concerns. And big tech companies and the AI startups are not doing much to help, and our organisations probably won't do anything until we're told to. So we're kind of in a security development limbo at the moment. But we better get to it fast, because we're going to start getting too comfortable with these infringements of our data, privacy, and our security.
Well, I think a lot of these vaguely dystopian AI assistants will kind of boil dry when the services are baked into the operating systems of phones. I mean, that's been hinted at recently with OpenAI's GPT technology being put into the upcoming version of iOS 18. One of the other fears about sending our personal data services is one of privacy, and that's the much used quote, often attributed to Joseph Goebbels, but it's not him. It says, "If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear."
Yeah, I've heard this elsewhere as well.
And that's what happens when security and privacy kind of get conflated. Life's really not quite that simple. The basic human right to privacy, according to the Human Rights Act of 1998, is not just about things like criminal acts or intent when it comes to our personal and corporate interactions. To counterpoint that last quote, I think there's another quote here more fitting to this talk, attributed to Cardinal Richelieu, this time actually accurately. See, what we say, do, or believe can be used against us even if it's entirely legitimate. What about when wearable devices become part of the social contract? Well, the truth is that our quest for the quantified self is one of the other parts of the allure of these devices, not a new concept. We've been tracking our steps, our calories, and other metrics for some time now. However, the question is, who's using this information, and why we're willing to give away more information when a leaderboard is involved? There's no real prize except for maybe the criminals, because really this is just kind of narcissism in data form. Why do you think all of this is so valuable it should be shared with everybody? What happens when you don't actually get to choose whether your data is being shared?
So when you don't get to choose, the dark side of the quantified self is when someone else is quantifying us. Now, unfortunately, we don't have time to go into too much details of things like bossware and workware time motion tracking, which are all very awful, but we would like to look at the bigger picture.
The UK government recently trialled GPS tagging for immigrants coming to the UK, which drew much ire from Privacy International, who found that basically the people subject to this had great physical and mental health impacts. Imagine having to account for everything you do every hour of the day, every day of the week, and potentially having that used against you, especially when there's a lack of transparency on what data is being collected and how it's being used. In most cases, people didn't even know how to actually challenge the decision of being tagged in the first place. And there was a range of practical problems with them. They didn't work very well. They didn't charge. They broke. And this year, only a few months ago, the ICO ruled that the Home Office had breached UK data protection law. Not really our finest hour there.
So, another point. Millions of people use menstrual tracking apps every day. They use them for lots of reasons, like predicting periods, for tracking health, menopause, knowing when to get pregnant, when to use contraception, things like that. Flow and Clue are the two biggest players in this area, and both have 50 million active users each. So, big deal. And health data, I'm sure we can all agree in this room, is extremely sensitive data. But in the wake of the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade in some states, got privacy experts beginning to be increasingly concerned about how that data is collected and how it could be potentially used against people in the future, particularly penalising anyone that might have had an abortion. Now, privacy experts were on edge about apps like Clue and Flow, because this data, whether it could be subpoenaed or sold to a third party, could be used to prosecute people. This is really something people are very concerned about at the moment in America. And with our perpetually recorded life, what's to say something that I did that was acceptable years ago won't be used against me today? It's very much in line with the Chinese social credit system, which showed that data can be used to exclude people outside of the law.
So frightening stuff. So far we've talked about things like the types of devices enter the ecosystem and how this social contract is changing, forcing us to choose between participating in a technology-driven society and things like our right to privacy and how it could be used against us in the future. But how much data sharing is going on these days? Well, let's have a quick look at cybercrime by generations. Before I reveal it, can I see a show of hands combining three types of cybercrime? So raise your hands if you think Gen Z have the most incidents. How about millennials? Gen X? How about baby boomers?
Right, okay, so baby boomers have got the vote, okay?
This is consistent. So CyberSafe's behaviour report shows that actually millennials aren't faring too well on cybercrimes. Are you surprised by this? The most tech-savvy generation is also experiencing the most incidents. Now, it could be that these generations are also the most online. According to McKinsey, Gen Z, only 1% of them read the T's and C's. They're most likely to take risks online. Most people have okayed access to personal information for exchange for some kind of nice cookie. But actually also Gen Z are doing things like buying VPNs and making other protective acts.
But I have to wonder, is it a coincidence that what McKinsey calls the most permissive of generations is also leading up quite a lot of these startups and AI companies? Could it be the fact that they are so permissive that they don't feel the ick factor as much as other generations might do?
Potentially. I think more research needs to be done, but there's a correlation. What it does say, I think, is we can't do a one-size-fits-all security because it's quite generational. So I think we're actually almost out of time, so shall we skip to the end? Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about digital panopticon. Come and talk to us about the digital panopticon later if you want to.
Well, let me tell you this story, though. Let's go back. So, it's not just things I'm wearing. It's not just my computer recording everything I'm typing on. It's happening all around us. And there was a survey done by this organisation called Big Brother Watch. And they published a study, and it's happening under our very noses with things like billboards. And they uncovered that millions of people's movements were being recorded all the time with these electronic billboards. And that's including children, and it's for targeting ads specifically. And if you watch it long enough, you will see some of these billboards actually, especially on the sides of buses, change for the individual slightly. And what they're saying is it's really intrusive surveillance techniques where they are literally watching you to understand, like, what's all the demographic details, what's your age, what's your gender, they call it dwell time. How long are you looking at this ad? How do you feel when you're looking at this ad? What's your facial expression? And they're taking all this data without consent. And they turned this in, and there's a cute news story that kind of came alongside with this, in which a shopping centre decided to use the electronic billboards, and it was to foster a dog. And so what they had is this dog. You would come into the shopping centre, and this dog would pop up and would follow you around the shopping centre. Again, without consent. This is the social contract in full force. So what are we going to do about it? Well, as I say, government legislation isn't there yet, so it just lies the burden one place. Us. Us building the products, us having to work with securing these devices, and also us consuming them. So just to recap, easy to adopt tech tends to be the hardest to secure because it's ubiquity and its ease in which it enters our environments and our habits. We're kind of on our own when it comes to government legislation on tech because it's slow. So it's up to us to influence good tech practices as positions in these new institutions. We need to make sure we're enabling business not only to collect what's needed, keep that GDPR close so it can't be used against us eventually. One size fits all never works in security, and it's certainly not going to work in this new tech landscape. We need to follow the whole attack chain, and not all cyber incidents are financially motivated.
Never mind, it's a call to action to us, really. Not something to fear, it just means we've entered into a new era of technology, and that means our methods will need to change accordingly. And we should all be champions of the responsible use of this technology, acknowledging that it will be used where we work, in the home, in public, and obviously in the physical workspace as well. And we go as far to say that security teams should fully own things like AI and IoT and smart device implementations, not to be a gatekeeper, but to actually enable it safely. And to do that, we need to start talking more about how we can change to meet this new era.
And so if you fancy that, it's free online. It's called Pilot for AI. It's a really great tool which you can use in your teams. It's a bit like a threat modelling activity. And if you are interested, and there's a little QR code there.
Yeah, and as a side note, if you actually enjoy the kind of awful AI, then there's actually this is GitHub repo that's keeping tabs on awful AI. I would recommend you go and have a read of some of that. Mm-hmm. It's really great.
Yeah. So in the world of the machines, knowing what it is to be human is going to be very important. It will be important for the architects of these devices and products to make sure that they serve us, make it irresistible for us to consume. It will be important to those who want to use what makes us human against us. And it will be important to us to make sure that they don't cross that line of what is wearable, shareable, unbearable. Thank you very much for your time and giving us a little bit of your lunch.